my way. I'll get there one day. 'Cause I wanna be famous. Na 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 na. I wanna be famous. I wanna be famous.
Hello, I'm Jordan Sylvan. You're probably wondering why am I back on campus after 10 months of being home? Well, in March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic hit and we all had to be home for a while. Because of COVID, I had to be on classes online for the rest of the spring 2020 and the whole fall 2020 semester. But in October, the president of Dean College sent out an email that we would come back for the spring 2021 semester. Unfortunately, things aren't the same as past semesters, but we did the best we can to keep everybody safe. So in this program, I'm going to be interviewing friends and faculty on how COVID changed their jobs and being back on campus. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you what the different things are on the campus this semester. So, enjoy, guys. Although there is a whole 24-page return to campus plan, these are some of the rules and changes that impact the students the most. One rule states that you can't go to any of the residence halls besides your own. Another one says that only one guest is allowed in your suite. A few of my classes are online and in person. If you want to use the gym, for example, you have to make a reservation ahead of time. The biggest changes have to do with classes and testing requirements. We have to track our daily symptoms on the Co-Verified app and get COVID tested twice a week.
What made me want to return to campus this semester was being independent and being on my own, as well as seeing all of my friends again and enjoying the full college experience.
I decided to return back this semester because I wanted to take classes in person and I miss seeing my friends.
I guess the reason I returned to campus is because the online format was not really exciting. I'd rather come back to campus where I can enjoy and socialize with some of my friends and have a one-on-one interaction with my professors.
Honestly, it feels amazing being back here after 10 months because it's been a long wait and this coronavirus has caused a lot of us to go crazy. So the fact that we're back after almost a year, it just feels unreal.
It feels great being back here because it's been just way too long and now finally back doing what I need to do.
I guess after 10 months, it is sort of a relief. Being crammed in my house where there's lots of noise and be coming here where it's a more open environment, not worrying about COVID. At least that Dean has taken the time to actually make it safe. Not going to say everything's perfect here. I mean, I would like to visit other people in other dorms, but it's still nice to come back on campus.
The best thing about being back on campus is seeing all my friends again and having independence that I haven't been able to have at home.
The best thing about being back is seeing all my friends because I haven't been able to see them during the pandemic and now I can finally get to see them again.
The best thing about being on campus so far is the social interaction, getting to go everywhere, going out, saying one last goodbye before I take off my senior year. I'm glad I got to do this up front instead of remotely.
The worst thing about being back on campus is that most of my classes are still online. There's a lot of restrictions on campus. We have to get tested twice a week and it's annoying. And most of my friends have graduated, so I miss not seeing them, so those are the worst things about being on campus.
The worst thing about being back was nearly getting COVID twice and it just put me through a lot with that and luckily I never got it, so yeah.
The worst thing about coming back is probably knowing that some of my friends have not returned and are doing online, and some have graduated, so would have liked to say goodbye. Didn't expect to say goodbye in like this. I guess, and now as I'm approaching the end, I'm thinking, when am I gonna move on? So it's a little scary.
Well, obviously, we're meeting virtually instead of meeting in person, and I'm not traveling to campus, so I just set up a little office up in my bedroom, and, I've been meeting with students on Microsoft Teams, which, I think has been really pretty easy and productive. I don't think that what happens in our sessions is much different from when we were meeting in person, except, sometimes there are some challenges with technology if things aren't working properly, but, Microsoft Teams has some good features that lets us, share documents and both work in them and edit them together, which, I think has been very helpful. I think also one other way that my job has changed is that, there are some students that I had been working with in the past who I'm not working with this semester. Either they maybe chose, not to return, or, if they're there on campus and they really, needed to meet with someone in person, they might be working with a different coach.
So, so we had to move online starting last March, as you know. And so that was definitely a challenge when we first had to move online to figure out how are we going to help students finish out the rest of the semester, because we were only halfway through the semester at that point. So having a lot more meetings on Teams, trying to be more flexible with students and trying to adapt, make sure that students can still have access to all the materials that they need, even though they were from home. Making sure, in my role, making sure that the materials were accessible to students. So having materials electronically instead of on paper in front of a student. Some students actually preferred that, and it was easier for them to use technology to access their materials, and for some students that was harder. So working with those students to make sure that they had what they needed even though they were working from home. So that was one way that the job changed. And then also just kind of, adapting to working with students virtually through meetings like this instead of meeting with students in person. So those have kind of been the biggest changes.
It's just the virtual piece. I mean, the change really has just been having to be over a computer rather than in person, and doing the screen sharing and trying to help folks to triage their tech issues and figure out how to get them connected with other people. One big change is that I've been able to what I call tag team meetings with to collaborate with other departments on campus. So I might call in an advisor as I'm meeting with a student, or they may do that, or it's just been really the virtual piece that has changed for my position more than anything else, and being home some days rather than in my office. Also, getting peer tutoring was something to be virtual was something that was under my watch. So that was a change as well.
Well, I think, sort of having to figure things out on the fly, like new technology, and, sometimes I think when you're meeting with someone online, there are some things that aren't as easy to do as when you're meeting in person. Like if, they have a textbook, obviously, unless it's an online textbook, I can't see what they're looking at. And in some cases, I think too, that, it's sometimes students might forget about meeting when we're meeting online as opposed to when we would meet in person. So sometimes there can be some issues with attendance also with my students. And I think also, sometimes I I just have to take my students' word that they have done things or, turn things in, and I can't necessarily check for sure. I just have to, trust that they're telling me, the truth in certain situations.
So I can say for me personally, I've been working from home full time all semester. I fell into a higher risk COVID category, so I had a workplace accommodation to work from home. So working from home is good in some ways because, I'm at my house, so I don't have to deal with a commute. I don't have to sit in traffic in my car for, an hour or so a day. But it can be hard for work-life balance, to shut off my computer and say, okay, I'm done for the day. I'm not going to work anymore. Because, when you're working in an office and you have that commute to go home, that's kind of a time that tells your brain like, okay, it's time to stop working for the day. Now we're going to go home into our home life. But working from home, my home life and my work life are kind of like, meshed together. So that's been kind of challenging. And it can be a little bit isolating in terms of working with your colleagues. So when you're working on a team with other people, not being able to just walk over to someone's office and pop in and just say like, hey, how you doing? I would have to schedule a meeting with someone and call them on Teams. And it just becomes, it's less, it becomes like more formal almost in a way, and not so much like just conversational, like dropping into someone's office to chat. So trying to stay connected to colleagues, and then also, shutting off the computer at the end of the day and saying it can wait until tomorrow, and taking that time at the end of the day. So for me personally, that's been a bit of a challenge. And then I would say in terms of working with students, making sure that students still feel supported, even though we're separated by a computer screen. So a lot of the conversations that I have with students, they're personal, right? Students are sharing private information. In my role as the accessibility services coordinator, I talk to a lot of students who maybe are going through a difficult time. And so trying to keep up that personal connection with a student, even though it's virtual and through a computer, can be kind of challenging. I think we've gotten to a good point, but it was something that took some adjustment.
Having to be both at home to work and in the office to work. I struggle with transition sometimes. So even though I have a consistent schedule, I still have an alarm in my phone that tells me to go to work tomorrow to make sure I'm going in on the right days. So I'm very, very extroverted. So meeting somebody over a computer rather than in person, it is a little bit different. I love having the opportunity to do that, but I love to be in the same room with another person. I get my energy from other people, and being able to read their body language a little better when they're right in front of me is helpful. And some students still don't like to have their camera on, so I can't see their face, I can't see their expression, so I can't read their body language, which tells me information. I only have to go off their words, and sometimes that can be hard.
So that concludes the program for today. I hope you guys enjoyed what my friends and the faculty needed to do to stay safe on campus and keeping everybody safe. I hope one day, when you guys go to college, you understand what it's like going there during the COVID-19 pandemic, and plus there are vaccines out there. Thank you guys for watching. Goodbye now.